Are you thinking about buying a home in the next few months? Will the presidential election have any effect on the housing market? In today's video, we were going to show you what to expect during a presidential election year. So if you've been watching the market carefully, trying to decide if now is the best time to buy or sell a home, stay tuned and I will show you what typically happens to the housing market during a presidential election year. I'm James Brophy. I'm a realtor and lifelong resident of the Myrtle Beach area. I love telling people how great it is to live in coastal South Carolina. My local insight and knowledge comes from living here for over 50 years. Adding real-time market data to my local knowledge allows me to provide you with valuable insights when trying to decide if Myrtle Beach is the right place for you. I would be more than happy to answer any of your questions about the Myrtle Beach area. In the description below, you'll find all my contact information. Send me a text or an email, or let's just schedule a call. And while you're there, if you could leave me a comment of where you're watching from, that would be great. Now let's move on to see what you can expect to happen to the housing market during this presidential election year. So one big question on people's minds right now is, how is the housing market going to be affected by the presidential election? It's a question that comes up every election cycle, so I decided to go back and look at the data from previous election years to see what has happened to the housing market. Today we're going to look at 4 key elements: consumer confidence, new and existing home sales, home prices, and mortgage interest rates. Now, I can tell you there's not a tremendous effect on real estate during presidential election years, but we're going to start here with this quote by Al Lord. Presidential election years affect the national housing market and mortgage rates through 3 interrelated channels: uncertainty, policy expectations, and consumer confidence. This is because consumers may choose to postpone major purchases or sales until they gain a greater confidence in the country's direction. So these 3 channels are on people's minds, which is uncertainty, which is purely they don't know what's going to happen; policy expectations, which is whatever administration is elected, will their policies affect their pocketbook; and consumer confidence, which is consumers will take a wait and see approach and see what happens in November before making a decision. So the good news is sales are postponed, but they are not lost. They're just kind of pushed into the following months or the next year. But during these election years, the reality is when you look at the election, there's also bigger things happening in the world that are also having a major impact on people's uncertainty and how they are feeling. Let's take a look at this slide. 2008 was the global financial crisis, which really had an impact on real estate. 2012 was a fiscal cliff in the Supreme Court reviewing the expansion of Obamacare and healthcare, and there was a European debt crisis. 2016 was Brexit and the whole European Union being shaken up. 2020 obviously was the pandemic, which was a major thing. Now in 2024, we have the rise in inflation, the crisis at the southern border, and wars in Ukraine and Israel. So there are many issues at play. People have strong opinions on all of them, and they will dictate who will be elected and ultimately drive the policy directions. So it's easy to understand why consumer confidence is shaken during these election years. But we're not here to discuss the broader issues of the country and the world. We're here to really understand what's going to happen with the housing market. And Ali Wolf has a good quote. Usually, home sales are unchanged compared to non-election years, with the exception being November. In an election year, November is slower than normal. And that's what I mentioned a few moments ago. Since there is so much uncertainty during presidential election years, people tend to postpone their decisions. Here's the slide with the data. So in a typical non-election year, we see around a 10% drop in home sales from October to November. This increases to 15% during presidential election years. People are saying, let's wait and see what happens before making our decision. It is important to note, though, that we don't lose those sales, they just get postponed. Now let's look at Ali Wolf again. In December and in the following year, the sales that are lost in November are recovered. It isn't that consumer says, I'm nervous and I never want to buy. They say, I'm nervous, let's just wait and see how things play out. So consumer confidence does get shaken in the times leading up to the election, and sales are postponed, but they're not lost. Now, where it gets interesting is looking what happens to home sales. Now, this chart has some great information. Here we have existing home sales in election years going all the way back to 1980. The left side is the year of the election and the right side is the year after the election. See all the green arrows? The number of existing homes sold went up year over year in the last 9 of 11 presidential elections. Another interesting fact is in a 4-year election cycle, the first year after the election is the best year for real estate. So 2025 should be a great year for home sales. Now you're probably asking, what about home prices? What happens with them? I've got a chart for that as well. As you can see here, existing home prices went up in 7 of the last 8 elections. The exception was 2008. And if you remember, that was not a good year for real estate. Typically, existing home prices go up the year following the election. Now, is that the same for new home prices? Now, here's the chart for new home prices. They have increased 10 of the last 11 election years. Now, the only exception again was 2008. But now we can confidently say home prices will continue to rise next year. Now we move on to our final component, interest rates. Now, over the last couple of years, the housing prices have been going up very, very rapidly, which is not healthy for the market. So the Fed decided to increase interest rates last year, which slowed the market down. Now, home prices continue to rise, but the rate of that increase was reduced dramatically. Now, what happens during interest rates during a presidential election year? Now, this chart goes all the way back to 1980. It shows rate changes from July to November of election years. Mortgage rates have decreased leading up to 8 of the last 11 presidential elections. And notice that 2 of the 3 years with increases saw very small increases. So this time around, expectations are that the Fed will reduce the Fed funds rate in September, which will likely cause mortgage rates to drop. And that kind of follows the recent trend with mortgage rates, which have been going down. So what does all this mean for you? I think we can expect an increase in home sales next year. I think we can expect the home prices to continue to increase, but at a much more moderate pace. And we should see some interest rate relief, which will help buyers with affordability. This quote from Bankrate sums it up pretty well. For most Americans, elections results have little direct effect on their income and therefore should not significantly impact their decision to buy or sell a home. Following these national trends really helps me understand our local market a little bit better so I can help you make good decisions. If you have any questions about the Myrtle Beach area, I would love to talk to you. All of my information is in the description below. You can send me a text or an email. You can even schedule a call. So please reach out. I'd be happy to speak with you. My name is James Brophy. I'm a realtor with RE/MAX Southern Shores here in Myrtle Beach. Thank you for watching.